And we are live.
Hi, welcome everyone to today's Community Conversations on Race, Living Between Cultures, Being Latina in Sonoma County. My name is Rocio Rodriguez, and I'm the Director of the Sonoma County Community Organizations Active in Disaster, or COAD. I'm the moderator for today. I want to thank the new viewers who are here and viewers who have been joining us already and are now watching our 12th conversation. These conversations started in response to police violence and the Black Lives Matter protests over the summer that are still continuing. There were only a few conversations that were originally planned, and there was so much to talk about that they continued, and here we are. So this conversation is the first one to deviate from conversations focused on the lived experiences of Black and African Americans in Sonoma County. And we do recognize that the same systems that are weaponized against Black folks have also been used against our community, and we stand in solidarity with the Black Lives Matter movement. I want to invite everybody to next Monday's Community Conversations on Race with Esther Lemus, Ozzy Jimenez, and Marta Cruz to talk about the experiences and perspectives from elected officials from the Latinx community. So today we have Nydia Mora, America Rosales, and Kathy Kane. We're going to talk about living between cultures, being Latina in Sonoma County. And I just want to say briefly that I didn't grow up in Sonoma County. I'm not from Sonoma County. I grew up in Texas. And my parents and I immigrated from Ecuador when I was 5 years old. But there's a lot of like these parallel experiences that I find with other Latinas or Latinx community members who also have these experiences, also being immigrants or are children of immigrants. So I'm really excited about today because then we get to kind of talk about and kind of compare those experiences. So I'm going to start with Nydia, then America, then Kathy. I would like to each of them to introduce themselves so everybody knows who they are, where they're coming from, and their own experiences about living between cultures, and then their experiences growing up as Latina in Sonoma County. So Nydia, would you go ahead?
Hi, everyone. So as Rocio introduced us all, my name is Nydia, and I've been living in Sonoma County for, I want to say, a long time. Since I was in first grade. We moved here with my parents, but I've grown up in Marin County as well. And we are from, well, my family's from Nicaragua, Central America. I was born here, but I do have very strong roots and strong ties to Nicaragua. And it's been interesting, always trying to work with the duality of being both a proud American, but a proud Central American all the same. And just always trying to prove or trying to show that I'm proud of both backgrounds of mine. And being in Sonoma County, as personally, I haven't experienced too much pushback or some kind of racism directly towards me. But I do see it in places, and it is something that needs to be addressed. And there are small, I would say, microaggressions that sometimes you get. And it's always interesting to figure out and navigate how to respond to those things. But I do feel like I feel like there are a lot of stories similar to mine, and that there are a lot of commonalities between me and my fellow ladies here tonight. So that's for me. So I'll pass it on to whoever's next. But thank you.
Hello, everybody. My name is America Rosales Orozco. I'm a program coordinator at Community Action Partnership in the Disaster Relief Assistance Program. I've been working with fire survivors and all the disasters that we've recently had in Sonoma County. I actually was born in Mexico. I immigrated here when I was 10 years old. And for me, it's been, 20 some years of learning how to be in a new environment. It was culture shock for me. And I've always been sort of shy about sharing my experience, because not necessarily because I experienced racism, but because very early on, I had to learn to sort of put my experience in a different perspective and change it to how I was when I was living in Mexico. I sometimes compare myself to when I was 10 years old to being 20. And I've been a very different person. And I think if had I grown in Mexico, I wouldn't be the same person that I am today. Just like Nydia said, the duality that I've had to juggle as a mom, as a Latina in Sonoma County has been quite challenging, and it's still a learning experience. I still have to battle some demons from growing up and having that culture shock. But just like Nydia said, I'm really excited to have this conversation. I feel like I'm going to bring a voice to those that sometimes feel like they don't have a voice. For a really long time, I felt like I didn't have a voice, and I'm still learning to have that voice. To share and to help others that in one way have been in my shoes or are in my shoes right now. So welcome.
Kathy.
So I'm Kathy Kane. I'm Assistant Director at Community Action Partnership, and I oversee our health and wellness, financial stability, and disaster relief programs. I have lived in Sonoma County for over 25 years, raised my children here, and grew up in Southern California. I was born here in the United States, and as were both my parents. My grandparents were immigrants, and I remember growing up, and even when I moved up here, I remember my great uncles talking about how they used to come up here and pick prunes and pick apples and sleep by the Russian River and eat watercress, sandwiches. So, growing up middle class in a very white town, there were very few Mexican families. The ones we all kind of met at church and, associated with each other. So I always, for myself, remember we didn't grow up speaking Spanish, so I am not, unfortunately, bilingual. I heard a lot of it through my grandparents speaking and my aunts and uncles, so I can understand it very well, but I don't speak it fluently. My parents really, I think, in the generation that they grew up in, really wanted us to assimilate, and so they didn't speak Spanish to us. And so, growing up, we always felt, and this is a conversation I've had with my sisters and some of my cousins, is that we never felt like we were accepted in either place. We were never Mexican enough, for the Mexicans, because we didn't speak Spanish and we didn't always follow the same, traditions and things like that. And so feeling like we were in between those worlds and just not really fitting in anywhere. And growing up saying, okay, gosh, Mom, I wish you had spoken Spanish to us, because I think I would have fit in better. So kind of feeling, that as I grew up, and even now, I'll sometimes have people say, well, you're not, you're one of those white Mexicans, or you're the Mexican vanilla. And it's true, you feel that way, that you're not totally fitting in. So that's kind of that perspective on myself. And then, also having a perspective on racism when 5 years ago, my son was murdered. And through his trial, it was 6 months from when he was killed to when we actually were able to first meet with the district attorney and find out what had happened on that day. And to find out it was an unprovoked attack, and the person confessed, and it was, a pretty clear-cut case of murder. And the first thing the district attorney said to us, she said, you need to be prepared, because this is a very, it's a very clear case of murder, but what they're going to do is they're going to paint your son as a racist. The man who murdered him was a Black man. And so they were going to paint Zach as a racist, that he would, he was confrontational with this person, that he called him derogatory names. And so my first reaction was, you've got to be kidding. I said, all you have to do is look at our family. We're a mixture of, every different color and, LGBTQ. And if you look at his roommates at the time, there were, a Black woman, a Black man, a Filipino. My son looks like me. He's very dark. So it was really very upsetting to hear that and to sit in court and have them try to paint my son as a racist, which was the farthest thing from what he was. So just dealing with those kinds of things and seeing how it can be used as, as a weapon against people and even within cultures. So, it's something that it was just, very upsetting. And there's for a very split second, you think as a parent, you think, wow, did I do everything in my power to make sure my son wasn't like that? So you do have that brief second where you think, oh, wait, hold on. But, ultimately the man was convicted, and it was ultimately his sister, who was my son's roommate, who testified against her brother and, said, if put in a position to believe Zach's story or my brother's story, I would believe Zach. So that's just where I'm coming from.
Thanks, Kathy. That is really heavy to share. And I know that there are some things that you had also mentioned when we were all preparing for this conversation together about how there was also like this pitting, like it felt like Black versus brown, like this like age-old tale of like pitting these two communities against each other. And I think that we see that in various ways, and I think that was a very clear example of how that kind of comes across. So I also wanted to see if Nydia or America had anything else to add, or maybe just add on to what your introduction was or to what another person said.
On my end, just hearing Kathy talk, there were two thoughts that came to mind. The first one about feeling that duality or feeling like you're not Mexican or American enough. I feel like that for me rings very true. Even though I wasn't born here, there are comments even within like friends or coworkers or things like that where they sometimes don't really believe that I wasn't born here because I come across as very white. But that was something that I had to, again, navigate when I was younger, when I was here and I realized that people were not listening to me, didn't want to associate with me in school because I was the only one that didn't speak English. I clearly remember telling myself, if I ever want people to listen to what I have to say, I'm gonna have to get rid of my accent. And so sometimes I wonder if the way that I talk was to assimilate one and to make sure that people accepted me for who I was. There are times where I feel very, very nervous and my accent, I feel, comes out and it kind of betrays me. And so I feel sometimes guilty that it comes out because I feel like I'm going to have somebody point at me and be like, she doesn't belong here. And again, when I'm surrounded by white people, sometimes I do get very nervous. But when I'm with my Latino friends, sometimes, I'm speaking Spanglish, and I also get that from them, like, oh, you're not Latina enough, or you're forgetting about being Mexican. Just like Kathy said, I did not grow up with very strong Mexican traditions just because I was born in a city. So city to town life can be very different in Mexico. And so coming here and meeting people that are from smaller towns, they seem to have very similar traditions, whereas people from the city might not. And so even associating with Mexicans was very hard for me. Like I could not find like a close group of friends that I could really identify with English speakers or Spanish speakers. It was difficult. Being this old now, I can say that I have a very tight group of friends. I know they're watching, so I'm saying hello to them. So it's been really nice to finally find again that voice that I always felt like I didn't have. And the second thought that I was going to connect to that was that the Black Lives Matter for me has almost in a way made me feel very unapologetic about who I am. I feel like I can now go out in public, and if somebody says something or does something, or I feel like I'm being judged or discriminated against, I feel like I now have a voice to defend myself or others. Whereas before, it was almost like I don't even want to look at the person. I don't even want to engage in anything because, again, I don't belong here, or they're going to notice that I'm not from here. So those were the two thoughts that I had when Kathy was talking.
Yeah, I wanted to add on to America's, how you're saying that sometimes you feel like you're not you're not either side. And for me, I see it a lot sometimes in, talking to other Latinos as well. You come across people who say, oh, I didn't even, it kind of crossed my mind that you looked Latina, but I figured it was only half, or it was only part of the way, because you don't have an accent when you talk. And so the first thing that when someone says that, I just think, oh, so you automatically assume those that are from Latino backgrounds or who are Latino are immigrants, or they all come here illegally. Like, you're already putting these people in a category. And it's always that battle of why are we in all being put into this box and then have to prove ourselves to be out of it or to not be part of it. And that also makes me feel a little guilty at the same time, because I do want to be proud of being Latina, but at the same time, you want to also prove that you are proud of being both. And so you're always in that battle of, oh, I don't, like America, you're saying that the accent kind of betrays you. I mean, my parents, when they speak English, they have an accent and I don't, because I was born here. But I remember, helping them study for the citizenship test, because they came here with a visa from Nicaragua, and then they went through all the hoops you have to jump through, right, to be part of this country. And it was just always interesting as me being little and thinking like, oh, not everyone's parents here has to go through this. And you start to see that difference very early on, and you start to feel that difference when there's things that people just can't relate to because they're white or because they're not immigrants in this country. And so I remember, always being proud of my parents for trying to learn the language and learning the language, but at the same time, always keeping me with that background of, yes, you're American. Don't let anyone ever try to tell you otherwise. But yes, you are also Latina, and don't ever let someone try to tell you otherwise. And like, hold on to both, because you are both, and that's what makes you you. So it's always the constant reminder of others will try to put up this division where there shouldn't be one, because we're all just trying to figure out being human, really.
Yeah,
But
and it's interesting sometimes, because my last name, it's my married name, and people don't expect me to look like I look sometimes, so it's like I'll see it sometimes in people's faces. It's like, here's Kathy Kane, and it's like, oh, and then they're trying to figure out what I am.
yeah, that's always the go-to, like, oh, you didn't fit the stereotype in my head.
But I think too, if you look, I mean, I know even growing up, it's, even the color of your skin. I remember even my girlfriend's mom, I remember hearing her tell her daughter when we used to go out to the beach, it's like, you shouldn't be laying out, don't get dark. If you're dark, that means, you're a worker. So even within the culture, and I know this is in other cultures too, it's like the darker your skin, you're perceived more as somebody who's probably outside laboring, and there is still that privilege that kind of comes with a lighter skin.
And I think, Nydia spoke about a little bit about division between cultures or the races. And I feel like in Sonoma County, as much as I love living here, I feel like there are distinct lines in our county that you can see where Latinos live, where white people live. And so I've always felt like that disconnect between all of us. And the other thing that, you know, Kathy is mentioning about being lighter or darker skinned within our own culture, it is a privilege to be lighter skinned, whether people want to recognize it or not, which I think, like, if you look at, you know, the four of us, we do have darker skin, but I can say just that the way that I am perceived in a way helps me. If I was darker and if I had a stronger accent, I feel like my experience here would be very different. So just the way that we look, the way that we present in a way gives us privilege within the county. And that's why I feel like maybe we necessarily not have a lot of experiences of racism or discrimination because of how we come across. And, you know, I want to recognize that, yeah, right now in our panel, we don't have the full representation of our culture, but as you can see, I mean, we do come from very different backgrounds and experiences that can shed a little bit of light of what it is, you know, to be Latino in the US.
Thanks. Yeah, I think it's really difficult to try to navigate these two spaces, like being an English speaker, having to fit in to be like quote unquote white. Like I shared also before how like I've been called a coconut, and it's usually a joke, and I would joke along with it too, but I eventually got to a point where I was like, actually, I'm really uncomfortable with it now. And because it makes me feel like that person is kind of taking agency over my identity, and I want to be able to call myself Latina and to feel really confident with that. And the same thing with like the language skills. Like my parents, when we came, my dad was already bilingual, my mom wasn't. So a lot of his effort and her efforts were on her learning English and then me learning English, because my dad also, just like what Kathy had shared, also thought that I would learn faster and I would fit in faster if I could only speak English. And then unfortunately, that really took away a lot of like precious time to build up those Spanish language skills. So I'm just lacking a lot in it. And there's a lot of times when I feel like I don't belong in a space because of it. And then I think I've had a lot of really good friends who like try to remind me and like kind of build up my confidence. Like there are other ways that I do fit in this space because of how I look like or who my family is and the ties that I still have culturally. So there's the challenge of like fitting it into the country that we might come from, or the country where our family is from. I'm sure if I went back to Ecuador, it would take me like years to really fit in, and people would know right away that I was American. And then also like how we're also being challenged in fitting in here. So I wanted to bring up something else that is like a really heated debate and discussion in the US. This is a subject that really, there's a lot of misconceptions around it and a lot of opinions about it. So I really want to talk about DACA. And for those who don't know, DACA is Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals. It's a US policy that started in 2012, and it provided privileges that US citizens, a lot of residents have when they are in the US, to those who are undocumented. So they had the ability to work, to have a driver's license. They were given ITIN numbers, or I believe they're also, I think I might need to be clarified on this, but they are Social Security numbers, so they are a form of Social Security numbers. And that really opens up a lot of possibilities for folks who weren't able to go to school or get scholarships or work before this. And it's still really under contention under the current administration. So I really wanted to hear, I think we'll start with America, about the DACA experience in the US.
Yes, absolutely. I think that's going to be the strongest voice or opinion that I bring to this panel, because I'm actually a DACA recipient. And like I mentioned before, that's something that I would have never talked to anyone about except very close friends, or obviously family members would know, but definitely close friends or people that I truly felt comfortable with. I would only share that with them. Again, because in a way, it's almost like I'm putting a target on myself. Like you mentioned, back in 2012 or 2013 was when I was able to get mine. And again, this was only for individuals that were brought here as children. And yes, we do get a social security number, an employee card or an employment card that allows you to work legally here. We pay taxes like everybody else. The only downfall is that we're not allowed to leave the country, which in my opinion, when it comes to immigration, that's where they hurt us the most. Not being able to go back to our homeland to visit family members who are either sick or dying or just going back to your roots. I can speak for myself and a lot of people in my family or just people that have been immigrants at one point that we would pay whatever it took just to go back to our homeland to visit one last time or, so I think, again, that's the hardest part about being an immigrant, not being able to go back when you are trying your best to be a law-abiding citizen. I've never been in trouble with the law in school. I was, always good grades, having to have this American dream become a reality where I would graduate from high school with, good grades, go to a university, and then eventually get a good job. I mean, if there was a textbook definition of what a child should do, that was me. I never got in trouble. I didn't party when I was in high school, and I always did my homework and all of that. And then you graduate, and then you get scholarships because otherwise you can't really go to school. And at that point, if you were an immigrant child graduating from high school, you had to pay out of state tuition, which was 3 or 4 times more than a resident. So luckily I was able to get some scholarships, and I did 1 year at Sonoma State. But then there was no money. And so I hit a point where there was like a little bit of depression, because for me, it's like, I worked so hard to be able to get accepted into the university. This dream that was sold to me in high school by my teachers, that anybody could go to school and anybody could graduate and anybody could get a good, decent job and have a good paying job and eventually buy a house and have a car. Like all of that was sold to me, and I did everything that I was in my power to get to that point, only to realize that yes, maybe I was going to graduate and I was going to be in debt, but I wasn't going to be able to work regardless of all my skills and all the effort that I put in school, because without a social security number, you can't get a decent job. So for a really long time, after I graduated high school and I did my 1 year at Sonoma State, I decided just to go to the JC because it was cheaper. And there was like no point in me anymore in going into, getting a degree, because I wasn't going to be able to do anything with it anyways. So, for a while I was working at a retail store, and I just remember always being like mad and depressed about like feeling like I had so much more to give. And again, just because of a 9-digit number, I couldn't do that. So I had to be put, again, like what we've talking about, like a category of being like a brown person doing, which there's nothing wrong with it. But again, when you're sold this dream and you want to fulfill that, and just because of a 9-digit number, you can't do it. So I ended up, getting pregnant and having a son, and I did everything that I could at the JC. I was ready to transfer again to a 4-year university, but it was the whole thing of like, what for? You're not going to be able to do anything anyway. So DACA came about. My son was born in 2011, and then DACA was accepted, or it became a thing in 2012. So I applied. I was very scared because, again, it's just putting yourself out there. Having the fear that immigration eyes, La Migra, can come and get you and you're taken away. So I took the risk. I was granted like I said, my social security, my work permit, and it opened up this whole world of opportunity. And again, once I had it, I almost went through another depression, because it was almost like, here I am, I'm almost 25. I have no schooling. On record, I have no skills that I can show to an employer why I would be a good person to get hired. So it's a funny thing, because one of my first interviews that I had, I actually cried. And it was very sad after I was done because I was like, I can't believe I cried in an interview. But it was almost like I was begging for an opportunity, you know, for people to see that I had like all these skills and all these things to give. I'm sorry, it always gets me. And yet, you know, I didn't have anything to show. So again, I'm here because I know I'm not the only one. There are a lot of young people out there who are not given the opportunity because they were not born here and they were brought here by their parents to give them a better opportunity. I think about my mom sometimes and how like she brought me here. I have a son now, and to like have that journey, like I can't even begin to imagine what I would do if I had to move with no language, with a child and no income, and have to go through that journey. So, you know, I have to give it to my mom. I think I'm sure she's proud of where I am today, but I want to say that for those that don't know, I mean, it's very difficult to not have a 9-digit number, and yet we do pay taxes. You know, we have to do everything everybody else does. So, you know, it's difficult, but I'm very thankful that I have DACA. I've been able to give my son a very different life. I've been able to give myself a different life. And I also know that me just being like working at community action, I've made a very good impact on those that I have come across, you know? So I would say, if you know any DACA recipients, support them as much as you can, because we do have a lot to give. And we just sometimes need that opportunity or that little push so that we can show you what we can do. You know, and the only difference between somebody who's born here and someone like me, it's really a 9-digit number and an opportunity.
And I just wanted to kind of say, piggyback on that, you know, is that because of the work that we do and the people we work with, you know, we hear stories that, you know, people, it's not just, you know, people from Mexico, it's people from all over the world that, you know, come here for a better life. They're escaping, you know, places that are horribly unsafe, that they've seen family members killed. You know, and they are really just trying to find some place where they can survive and live and have their children grow up. You know, and just like America said, you know, they have so much to give. They want to contribute, and there's so many barriers to them being able to do that. And, you know, you sometimes hear that, oh, you know, anybody like that, if you're illegal or you're, you know, that you're just, you know, using resources that should go to other people, to good, upstanding, you know, legal citizens. And the reality is, you know, again, we need to recognize that they're coming here for a reason. You know, this is a place of opportunity. And, you know, if given the chance, anybody, you know, who needs, you know, who wants to work, they're coming here because they want to work, they want to contribute. And we see it all the time. And they're the people all around you. You know, they're the people who are, you know, picking your fruit. They're the ones who are washing your car. They're the ones who are working in places like, you know, that we work in, you know, so they're already there. They're already there contributing, but we just need to recognize that and really take care of some of those barriers.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to generalize and to say like, oh, those people, like we and them, and have that separation without truly realizing how many you might already know. I mean, for example, America, how many people do you know, right? Like how many people have you talked to? And before, I don't know about now, but before, how you were saying that you were scared to say that you were a DACA recipient because that puts a target on your back, and it shouldn't be that way. And, you know, there's people that you could have helped, people you could know that they probably could have been one of the people putting that target on your back and not expecting it was on your back, they were putting it on. So it's a lot of the things that you don't know, you truly don't know who is benefiting from these things, and who, even if they are benefiting, still how much they're lacking and how much they're missing. And one of the things I recently learned with DACA, everyone, well, I shouldn't say everyone, I assumed that it was mostly for those who were, who immigrated here from Mexico or from other Latino American countries. And it's for anyone. It's for any child who was here at a young age and they were brought here and they want to go to school or they want to get a better education to work and to show that they have something to give. And the fact that it's always targeted because it comes with the assumption that it's for the illegal Mexicans that come into the country or the illegal Latinos that come into the country. And it's always targeted for that reason, just shows how much it's not really about even looking into what it is if it is already associated with a group that you don't like or that this country has institutionalized to demonize or to put aside. And I just, it's not fair. It's because all these people, you have no idea how much they could contribute and help and change. And you never know when you'll need a helping hand from America or from Kathy or from me or from Rocio, at Community Action, helping for example, right now during COVID or helping with fire relief or anything. So it's a lot of the time these people saying these things, I feel like they haven't taken that time to have that empathy towards others, to realize who they're talking about and, educating themselves about what it is they're actually disgusted by or don't like from other people. Because I think if people took that time to broaden their minds and educate themselves about what it is that's going on at the moment, or what DACA is, or what all these other laws or things that go through, what they're really for, I think that would help. I would like to think it would help people understand and maybe not be so ready to pit people against each other.
Yeah, Nydia, just talking about that, I feel like there's still a big misconception about how people can become legal in this country. A lot of people that don't know, it's easy for them to say, well, why didn't they just wait? Or why didn't they apply for a visa? Or why didn't they apply for a green card when they were, in their native country? And the reality is that not a lot of people can apply. I mean, you have to have assets in your homeland. If you want to apply from abroad, you have to show that you have an education or that you have money that you're going to come back to. And even when you are here already illegally, in order to apply for something like that, there are very limited options. And sometimes it takes 20 years or more to actually get approved for a green card. The easiest way is to marry someone and then someone who's a citizen, and then they can petition to, give you a green card. But the process can be lengthy. It's up to 2 to 3 years, and it's pretty expensive. It's about, give or take $10,000 to $15,000 per applicant. When it comes to DACA, it's not something that's going to be here forever. I mean, every year, 6 months prior to my employment card expires, I have to apply again. I can't get in trouble. I can't get, pulled over. I have to be such a good citizen. Like, I have to be impeccable. Otherwise, I put myself at risk of not getting approved for that. And it's about $500 or so every time you apply, and you only get it for 2 years. The current administration actually took one of those years away. So now we only get it for 1 year. So there's always this anxiety behind, am I going to get it? Am I going to get approved again? And if I don't, then that puts, that puts everybody around me at risk, including my son. Let's just say I don't get approved this year. I'm not going to be able to work where I work right now. I'm going to have to find something where somebody's going to accept a fake social or something like that, But again, it's not an easy process. It's not something that, I don't know, that just doesn't come as easy as some people might think.
Yeah, that you're constantly living with that, the possibility of, is this the year they're finally going to make it harder or just completely take it away? Or is this the year they're going to change it up where I won't be able to qualify? Or it's just always on your mind. It's never like, oh, okay, I got it, I'm done, it's over. There's just always something, always coming at
There's
it again.
definitely, I mean, you figure, I mean, how much of your life you live in fear, and that's really it. How many are out there living in fear every day, and what that does, to your overall health and your mental health, to constantly be worried about that, or your children to be worried about that. You know, is mom and dad going to be there when I get home? So for children, it's also, being recognized as a huge mental health, burden.
Yeah, I think a lot of dialogue that I heard after DACA came out was that it was like a sigh of relief for like so many people. But I don't think it's talked a lot about how there's still a little bit of that fear and apprehension. And then preparing for this conversation, I was looking up some DACA information, and that's when I actually saw that the 2 years had been decreased to 1 year. And then I realized that there's even smaller and smaller fragments of time. And then somebody asked a question about like updating their IDs, and then finding out that that could still be a risky move for them. I'm not trying to say that it is. I'm not trying to put out, sorry, like any information that might be incorrect or not, but that's like a fear that was coming out in a conversation. So I want to kind of talk a little bit more about what Nydia was kind of referring to in America with fear and like this barriers and challenges that we experience in Sonoma County being Latina. So I really want to like ask questions about like racism here in Sonoma County, what you've experienced. Nydia and I live in Petaluma, and America has some feelings about that. So I really also want to, I'll like start off with America again, if you want to kind of share your feelings.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I don't feel like I have experienced very direct racism or judgment. I do have one story when I was in 6th grade. That was my first year that I was here. Like I said, I told myself, you have to learn, you have to get rid of your accent. And, once I graduated 6th grade, I got a lot of diplomas. Like my teachers were blown away by how fast I had learned English and how I had kept all my grades up, regardless of, the language barrier. So we were living in Santa Rosa, and then my uncle, who my mom and I lived at the time with, purchased a home in Windsor. And so we moved with him. And, it was the summer of, can't remember, 2001, I think. And I was going to start 7th grade. So my uncle took me to, sorry to put you guys on the spot, but Windsor Middle School. And again, I had all these, diplomas and notes from teachers saying that I was ready to be out of ESL, which is English as a second language. And we went there, and I was going to get enrolled. And my uncle was told that, they didn't have any programs for me, and that the best school for me would be Cali, because at the time Cali was seen as the Latino school. And so, my mom in a way didn't really want to put me there, because she kind of felt like I had learned the fastest, and I had assimilated the fastest, in what they call sink or swim sort of experience, where they just kind of throw you in, you got to learn. And so my mom thought that it was going to actually be detrimental to me if I went to Cali. But again, Windsor Middle School didn't want to accept me, didn't provide any tests to see if I was, if I was ready or not to be in Windsor Middle School. So I ended up being at Cali. And, years later, Cali is now, they have a point system, and a lot of people want to take their kids there because it provides that bilingual education, which nowadays, you get paid a little bit more if you are bilingual, and it's looked at as something great. But in terms of, there are several towns here in Sonoma County that I just don't feel comfortable visiting. And like you mentioned, Petaluma is one of them. I go there maybe just to go to the outlets and, if I have to, but I just never really felt like I'm welcome there. Not because anyone has done anything, but I just feel like most people that live there don't look like me. And I don't necessarily know where the section of in Petaluma is where, someone like me could go and visit. And the other town is Healdsburg. And, you know, funny when all of this started happening, how there was a lot of light being shed on Healdsburg and how, you know, overtly racist they were. They were in the news. So those are the two towns in the county that I just don't necessarily feel welcomed, and I don't really visit often because of, you know, of how, I guess because of the representation that exists within those towns. I mean, Santa Rosa, again, like I've mentioned, I feel like it's very still divided, but you know, you go to the grocery store and you can kind of see more of that diversity that you don't see in places like Healdsburg or Petaluma.
Nydia, I think you also mentioned how growing up here, services look different for the Latino community. Can you also talk about that? And then after that, we're gonna go into we're getting some questions from the public. So just a heads up.
Well, I grew up in Petaluma. I did, you know, from first grade all throughout high school. And I thankfully personally never really experienced racism in a very harsh or negative way. Growing up, we didn't have that many Latino kids in class. I distinctly remember when there was a new student coming into class. I think I was in like first grade or maybe third grade, around there. And my teacher pulling me aside and saying, "Oh, Nydia, okay, so we're gonna have a new student and she doesn't speak that much English. So I'm gonna need you to translate if there's something that she doesn't understand, because I know you speak Spanish." And I remember just kind of, you know, like, oof, yes, my time to shine, right? To show off the Spanish side of myself, right? And it was interesting to try to you know, translate when you're trying to explain homework that you're not really understanding either, because you're a third grader, right? And trying to explain it to someone else. But there were also times where it was like, "Oh, wow, you're really good at this and this," or "Wow, you're a really good student." And there was this almost like a shock. And so at first you're like, "Oh, thank you," you know, like, but after a while, the compliments start kind of hitting differently. And you start thinking like, is this really a compliment, or are you more underestimating me? Or is it like you were assuming something else? You start getting these other questions in your head of like, are these genuine compliments? Or are you assuming like compliments because they were based off of you assuming I was lesser or wouldn't understand or was less articulate because of how I look? So it's always a question in the back of my mind whenever something like that happens. But Petaluma doesn't have as much Latino culture involved in the community like in Santa Rosa. I remember my sister, she works at Community Action as well. And when she started and hearing all the programs that she was getting and the programs that CAP had to offer, I was amazed at how much, you know, help there and resources there actually were, because you don't hear it a lot here in Petaluma. And now that I'm working there as well, you see a lot of that inclusive dynamic of, oh, there's the Latino community night here, or, you know, these conversations now, or, oh, if you have questions about where to get food or other resources, you know, in English, you can text this to this number for information, or in Spanish, you can text this for this information. And I just never saw any of that here in Petaluma. You just kind of have to figure out where to get it if you need it. And so I thought that was the biggest difference. And America, I see where you're coming from and maybe not feeling as welcome because you don't see it in the community. And I would agree, it's starting to change a little bit now. But I do distinctly remember being in a class and being the only one with, you know, curly black hair, not long blonde straight hair, and seeing that difference over time. So
Yeah,
it's
and I
interesting.
think, I think Nydia brings up a good point in that children growing up, of immigrant families is, the children are often that middle ground. They're the ones who still often have to translate for their families, for their parents, and still trying to assimilate and learn English and, do this. So those children really do walk that, that boundary between the two cultures.
Right. So thank you for all your thoughts on that. I think it's very challenging to try to, again, figure out like these two different worlds and how do you like navigate them, especially as a kid. So I'm going to pose this question from the community. Question is, can we talk about the BLM movement and how the Latinx community fits in?
I'll jump in. And I've seen it a lot in Nicaragua, where I come from. We have La Costa Atlántica, which is the Atlantic coast, and there are a lot of Afro-Latinos, Latinx community over there because of early slave trade. That's where all the main ports were coming in and where they were established. And you see that colorism even between, like, amongst ourselves, and these people are over there because they're the ones from African descent, they're Black, they're over there, and we're over here, we're the colonialized, like, we're over here. And I just always remember hearing when I would go visit my family, as I was trying to fit in myself, trying to see more Latina and not have this, whitewashed look about me while I'm over there, hearing this conversation of, she, pobrecito porque they're Black, or pobrecito because they're darker. And always thinking, like, does it even matter? Like, they've probably been here as long as our heritage has been here. I mean, they were all brought in at the same time, and it's really just about is it really just about being Black, or is it about just the color of the skin? Is it both? And so I think that's it. You see that a lot here as well, where it's like, you've been here just as long as any other white person could have been, but just because you have darker skin, or because you're Black, or because you're this or that, you have this automatic division and institutionalized division even. And it's outrageous to think that you're dividing your own country when they're just as much the citizens and people of this country as anyone else.
For me, oh my God, I just feel like there's a lot that I would want to say about this, but I know that time is running out. First of all, I've always almost felt, for a long time, even before the Black Lives Movement happened and all of this kind of started being discussed in public, was that as a culture, I felt not only bad, but I just couldn't believe that they still have to go through all of this. I think, again, when we were preparing about this, I remember telling you guys that in the past, I've shed tears for the Black lives. Not because of recent years, but when I started, learning more about the history and what they've been through, and to think that they, again, in a different way, they're still going through it. When Black Lives Matter, became a stronger movement, I remember thinking, we cannot be part of the change unless we acknowledge that within our culture, we also have that problem. I mean, look at our telenovelas, look at our Univision shows. I stopped watching Univision many years ago when there was this program, kind of like Dancing with the Stars, but in Spanish. And I remember, I'm sure some of the people watching know Amara La Negra, which is this beautiful Black Dominican girl. I mean, if you watch and go on YouTube and look for her videos when she was doing the dancing, I mean, her dancing was just amazing. And I remember, she was one of the finalists, and she ended up losing. She came on second place. And I think there was another one Dominican. I think they're both Dominican, but the other one won. And she was always at the bottom. I mean, she did not know how to dance. And so that's when I started recognizing, I mean, even before that show, that within our culture, we do not respect and we do not treat people who are darker with dignity, and we make them feel less. So again, when we were preparing for this, I remember saying that you cannot begin to change the world or point at the US for being racist if we don't acknowledge it at home, if we don't acknowledge it within us. So for me, I feel like the Black Lives Movement and where Latinos come together is acknowledging that, first of all, and also recognizing that not only are we different, but we're more similar than we think. I'm going to give a shout out to my coworker, Wade. I mean, I've worked with him for the last 2.5 years. Again, he's Haitian American. I would have never been friends with him had it not been for CAP. And I can say that he's one of the people in the most recent years in my life who has helped me look not only at Black people different, and in knowing that within the Black community, there are also, they have just diversity, just like Latinos do, you know what I mean? And that's something that I was not, I guess, aware of, or I just, again, would put people in categories just like other people have put me in categories. So I think, again, you know, I'm repeating myself and saying that if we really want to support and help our Black brothers and sisters, then we have to acknowledge that first. And we also have to recognize that as a culture, we've been doing the same thing that, you know, that let's just say the US has been doing with Black people. So we have a duty to change, to accept, to ask questions, to point out when, you know, when our own family members are saying, you know, negritos, or, you know, lock your doors because, you know, there's a Black person coming or getting near us. I mean, all of those type of comments affect and keep repeating the cycle that everybody else is doing against Black people or darker skinned people.
Right.
So
And just, oh, real quick, just to jump on that, it's like, you know, again, just informing and having open conversations with our friends who are not, you know, dark skinned. You know, I had a discussion with a friend and she said, you know, kind of what, you know, was being said. It's like, well, all lives matter. Well, it's like, that's not what it's about. I said, you know, she said, I taught my son to, you know, to not see skin color. I said, but that's not what it's about. I said, you know, it's about, you know, you didn't have to have a discussion with your son what to do when he gets pulled over by the police. That you didn't have to worry that your son going out, you know, wearing a hoodie was going to, you know, potentially not come home. So that's where that discussion needs to come in, and to talk about things like that, because it's, you know, yes, everybody matters, but it's not about, it's about the equality and the equity in our community.
And going off of that, Kathy, I think that, you know, obviously we cannot compare Latinos and Black lives in the US as being the same, because I do recognize that they go through a lot more discrimination and a lot more anxiety and fear than we do. But one similarity is that in my opinion and in my experience, I feel like my mom almost had that conversation with me, not because she was afraid that I was going to get killed, because again, there's no comparison with a Black child to a Latino child going out in public, unless of course they look a bit cholo, you know. I think that's maybe the similarity. But in my case, I felt like my mom almost pushed me away from looking too Latina, because she knew that I wasn't going to get accepted as well. You know, I do remember her being at the mall and saying, who do you want to look like the most? Do you want to look like this person, this Latina girl that looks like a chola? Or do you want to look, you know, chola means gangster. Or do you want to look more like the white person that is going to get, you know, more opportunities, or it's going to get accepted a little bit more? Another thought that I have about this is that I have a child that is a little lighter skin. And I've had conversations in my own family that in a way we're kind of glad that some of our, you know, newer generations are looking lighter skin, because we know that they're not going to have to go through some of the assimilation process or perhaps the discrimination that a darker child might go through. You know, I see my son being treated differently when he's close to someone darker. So it's still a reality. It's still happening in Sonoma County. It's still happening in our communities. We might think that we're very liberal and we're very accepting, but the reality is that it's not. And there's still a lot of change that we need to do. And again, we have to look back and we have to look in the mirror and see what little tweaks we can do on a daily basis to make sure that we're moving forward, not only as individuals, but eventually as a community.
So we're gonna close out. We are, I think, we're at 6:30. So we know that questions did come in from the community. Because we've run out of time, we can't respond to them. But I would love to continue those conversations offline as well with you all, and that we're gonna have to continue these conversations again with those and respond to some of those questions. I think they're really heartfelt. I have a quick question to ask you all. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a Latina identified girl who is growing up here in Sonoma County, who might be experiencing the same tensions or frustrations, or even things that we love about being Latina? So what's one piece of advice that you would give her?
I would say get involved in your community. The only way you're going to make change is to get involved. There's a lot of opportunities to do that, and be proud of who you are.
Yeah, I would add off of that, to own the duality, to not try to fit in more in one side or the other, but be happy that you're a mix of both, a mix of everything. You can bring out the good from both sides, bring out the issues from both sides and be able to speak on it. And I would also say to not only hold yourself accountable for educating yourself and understanding where you come from, but also holding others accountable and fixing those problems that come up in day-to-day life and trying to correct it or to educate or just to point it out as much as possible, so that it's not just an individual thing, but also, telling others that, hey, maybe that comment shouldn't be made, or hey, maybe you should check on what you're talking about. Always having the courage to speak up whenever you feel is necessary.
I would say to a young Latina who's living in Sonoma County that is probably going through some of the things that we've talked about, to just find their voice. I mean, I think it's such an eye-opening experience when you feel like what you have to say and contribute can have an impact, even if it's just on one person. I know it takes a lot, like Nydia said, it's not only research of what's out there, but also within yourself, learning who you are in this world. And the other thing is be open to other people, be open to other communities, be open to people that do not look like you. For the longest time, again, trying to fit in, I wanted to, stay within this pocket of Latinos, but I've learned to realize that talking to others, you grow, and it just makes you that much more interesting. And ask questions, ask the hard questions, have the hard conversations, because those are necessary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all the panelists, to Nydia, America, Kathy, for being here. This is really, really awesome. To all the viewers who are here, it's so special that we're able to share all of our thoughts with you all and for you to ask those questions. And we're really looking forward to continuing these conversations. So as a reminder, please join us next Monday at 5:30 p.m. for another community conversations on race with Esther Lemus, Ozzy Jimenez, and Marta Cruz to talk about experiences and perspectives from elected officials from the Latinx community. So have a good night, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.